Good morning, everyone. This is the Theology Central podcast coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church, located right here in Ovalo, Texas. Yeah, I'm off to a really bad start this morning. Maybe I should start over. Welcome, everyone. This is the Theology Central podcast coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church, located right here in Ovalo, Texas. It is Saturday, April the 10th, 2021. It is currently 7:41 a.m. Central Time. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, whenever you may be listening, however you may be listening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to anything I have to say. It's a great honor and privilege to be able to do this. So thank you so very much. If you're one of the lucky ones, I don't even like the word luck. So let's throw out the word luck. Not one of the lucky ones, one of the fortunate ones. That's much better. I don't believe in the concept of luck. So let's throw out that concept, all right? So there are no lucky people, fortunate people. If you're one of the fortunate ones to be listening to me live this morning, which it really is great fortune to listen to me live. Don't you agree? Okay, you probably don't agree. If you're listening to me live this morning, feel free to say hello using the Spreaker app. Just hit the little chat icon and you can say good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time, wherever you may be. And you can throw in your 2 cents at any time during this live broadcast. You can ask questions. You can throw in your thoughts, your perspective. And trust me, that's always helpful, always beneficial. So don't be shy. Feel free to jump in and share your thoughts, because sometimes your thoughts are so much better than the thoughts of the person you're listening to, all right? So feel free to share them because it makes me look good. See, I can just look over here, read your thoughts, and act like they're mine, right? I'll just look over, read your thoughts, won't tell anyone that you shared them, and then I will state it like it's coming from me. I'll be like, wait. I just got this very important thought, and then I'll state it, and then I'll get the credit for it, and then nobody will ever know who you are, and you'll remain anonymous, and I'll look really smart. All right. Hey, good morning. Someone from Victory Baptist Church is listening. Wow. That's always great. Good morning. Thank you very much. That's always wonderful to hear members of your own church listening. So thank you very much. All right. We've got a lot to do today. Enough with joking around. We've got a lot to do today. All right. The stack of stuff I have here to talk about today, I could be here literally from now to about 10 o'clock tonight, and we wouldn't even get through half of the stuff I would like to talk about. And I can't be here that long today. My wife needs me home at a specific time. So we've got to get to this, and it's going to be unpleasant. All right. The next probably hour is going to be very unpleasant. It's going to be controversial. So let's start with just some basic ideas here. All right. It's always disappointing. It's always frustrating when some controversy emerges within Christianity, where you have basically Christians going after one another. Because what you would hope could happen is that the Christian who has a problem with another Christian could just contact that Christian, and then that Christian would be like, hey, let's have a meeting, let's talk. And then they could go somewhere in private without anyone knowing, without any bloggers knowing, any podcasters knowing. Nobody knows about the meeting, and they go behind closed doors and they discuss and they talk, and they can come to some kind of resolution, and they can resolve the problem. And that everyone walks out better spiritually. That is the way you wish it would work, but we all know that that's not typically the way it works. When controversy emerges and there's two sides in a fight amongst Christians, right? They break off into their two sides. Each side seems to recruit more people to support them. The other side recruits people to support them. And then you go from just two individuals having a problem to basically two armies having a problem with each other. And they're calling each other names. They're insulting. Everyone runs to their podcast microphone to give their side. And the other person's runs to their podcast microphone to give their side. Everyone hops on Twitter to give their account. And it's just arguing and fighting and arguing and fighting. And a lot of people caught in the middle, they don't know which side to believe. They don't know how serious the issue is. And it just builds and it builds and builds until sometimes what ultimately happens, finally, something blows up, and then a lot of ugly information comes to the surface, and then someone's ministry is destroyed, someone's life is destroyed. And usually you're left with far more casualties than you're left with anything good coming from it. Sadly, that's the way it works a lot. I wish it didn't, but we shouldn't be shocked that this happens because Christianity is made up of sinful people. And sometimes even when your motives are pure and even when you're trying to do the right thing, sometimes you end up doing the right thing in a very wrong way. So it's always sad. And if you've been watching over, I don't even know how long, it feels like about a year. Maybe it hasn't quite been a year, but I think it feels like it. There has been an ongoing dispute arising between Julie Roys, her last name is spelled R-O-Y-S, Julie Roys, and the ministry of John MacArthur. All right. There's a Julie Roys that keeps releasing and publishing these investigative reports into John MacArthur, his finances, his ministry, and it's starting to get pretty ugly. It really is. There's been pushback from MacArthur's side, and it keeps going back and forth. This claim is made, and this claim is either tried to be refuted, or John MacArthur's side, usually using Phil Johnson, then we'll call Julie Roy's names, and it's just sad to watch. And it's like, why can't y'all just sit down and try to work this out? And to be fair, in many cases, the MacArthur side doesn't even seem willing to actually just answer pretty direct and straight questions that could resolve a lot of this. Now, if you would ask Julie Roys, hey, what are you trying to do? Why are you doing this? Why are you going after John MacArthur? She would tell you that she's doing this to report the truth and to restore the church. In fact, if you go to the julieroys.com, you can see that is really the tagline at the top of her website. Reporting the truth, restoring the church. And she would probably argue that, look, John MacArthur is a very, 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 very influential leader in American Christianity, in the evangelical world. Some will say in parts of the Reformed world. He's very influential, and there's no way to deny that. He's very influential. So Julie Roys would argue because of his great influence, if there's questionable things going on, someone's got to report it. If there's something questionable going on, people need to know because people are sending him large donations, millions of dollars go into his ministry. The donors need to know what they're donating to. They need to understand what's going on. And there's some questionable things. And I would add to that, let's be fair, MacArthur has had a history of going after a lot of other people and criticizing a lot of other pastors and a lot of other ministries. So that kind of opens him up to people asking his ministry questions. So it's gone back and forth. Julie Roys posted a report about MacArthur owning 3 homes, all about salary, money, how much money he's worth, and that created a lot of controversy. And there's been a lot of people have criticized MacArthur and his handling of COVID. There seems at times it gets really murky. It's like the Grace to You, our Grace Community Church and John MacArthur, they seem to make certain claims about COVID and, was COVID, did people in the church get COVID? They're not following the guidelines. And there's other people going, wait a minute, there was an outbreak of COVID in the church and the church covered it up. The church is saying that's not true. And it seems like every other week there's a new development and this ongoing, I hate to describe it this way, this like ongoing grudge match between Julie Roys and John MacArthur's ministry. Maybe that's an oversimplification, but it feels like this. And a lot of people are going after Julie Roys going, hey, what's your issue? Why do you keep going after MacArthur? And then the people on Julie Roys' side are telling the people on the MacArthur side, what's your problem? Just answer the questions. And if you read the comments under any of the articles on the Roys report, you'll see this back and forth. You'll have some MacArthur supporters, you have Julie Roys supporters, and it's like, how about we just stop taking sides and just say, what's the truth? So what I'm going to do for you this morning is Julie Roys did a podcast the other day, and it's all about John MacArthur and his ministries. And she's asking, what's the truth about John MacArthur and his ministries? We're going to analyze this. We're going to take time. If you have any questions about any of it, or Phil, give me your perspective. Now, here's the thing. We have to set aside our personal feelings. Now remember, John MacArthur was played a very crucial role in my discipleship. Such a crucial and critical role in my discipleship. So many of my ideas about preaching come directly from John MacArthur. Trying to go verse by verse, expository preaching. So much of it comes from him. So I owe a lot to his ministry. But here's the thing. I got to set aside that personal feeling to go, what's the truth? If there's an issue, there's an issue. And if there's an issue, I'm not saying that John MacArthur should be taken out back and crucified. What I'm saying is there needs to be acknowledgement, there needs to be repentance, and there needs to just fix the problem and move on. All right. John MacArthur, he's obviously he's a human being, so he's not going to handle everything correctly. And at the same time, Julie Roys, she has not played near the critical role in my life as a John MacArthur, but I appreciate what she tries to do on the Roys Report. She tries to take a hard look at the evangelical world. Instead of spending all of her time worrying about what the evil world is doing, she spends time looking at what the church is doing. And there's got to be people out there calling the church into question. There's got to be someone out there going, hey, before we look out the window, let's look in the mirror. Before we open the window and start yelling at everyone on the street below, let's go into the bathroom and look in the mirror and then yell at ourselves, because we usually have enough problems within Christianity that I think that should keep us busy before we start yelling at everyone outside of Christianity. And I know that when you try to turn the spotlight to what's going on within Christianity, Christians get really mad at you. I know that from personal experience. If you get on Christian radio and you criticize what's going on in Christian radio or going on within Christianity, you won't be on Christian radio very long. I know that from personal experience by being kicked off Christian radio. So, and I know that if you're on a website like Sermon Audio and you go after what's happening within Christianity, usually the emails you get are going to be pretty mean and harsh. Now, if you're on Sermon Audio and you're attacking the evil world, you're going to get the amens. But sometimes we've got to take a look at what's going on in our own. Judgment begins in the house of the Lord. We have to look at what's going on in our own backyard. And I appreciate what she's trying to do. So I can appreciate what she's trying to do. MacArthur has had a major influence in my life. But you know what ultimately matters? Set aside Julie, set aside John. What's the truth? And what does it say about Christianity, and how should we think about it? All right. So I just want to throw out some of those initial thoughts before we do this. But are you ready? We're going to sit back. We're going to listen. I'm going to be breaking in and analyzing. You'll feel free to throw in your comments in the chat at any point in this, and let's see where this leads us. This is a podcast that was published on March the 16th, 2021. It's taken me a while to get to this. For the longest, the way Julie Roys report, it's called the Roys Report, her podcast. The way it was set up, you really couldn't download an episode. And so that made it difficult for me to download to be able to analyze it. But now she's got it set up really nice. I like the way they have it set up now, and it's very easy to download now. So this was published on March the 16th, 2021. This is episode 65. It has 87 comments under it, and the comments are pretty crazy to read. It's called What's the Truth About John MacArthur and His Ministries. There's a full show transcript here on the Roys Report. You can go to the julieroys.com. You can follow along with the transcript if you want. And later on, you can read all of the comments there and see what you think. Right, but here we go. What's the truth about John MacArthur and his ministries? This is the podcast, The Roys Report. Let's listen, let's think, let's analyze, and let's just see what I don't even know where this is going to go. You know what I like to do? I don't listen to things in advance so that I can rehearse my response. We listen to it together in real time. So let's sit back and let's discuss. Here we go.
What's really going on with John MacArthur, his ministries, and the Masters University and Seminary? Today, a former high-ranking administrator at the Masters Seminary gives us an inside look. Welcome to the Roys Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Roys, and joining me today is Dennis Swanson, a former vice president at John MacArthur's Masters Seminary. For more than 20 years, Dennis worked as an administrator there, and during his time, he oversaw operations, the library, and accreditation. He also was involved in editing the John MacArthur Study Bible, which he says John MacArthur didn't write. He also wrote a chapter in John MacArthur's book on counseling, yet Dennis's name doesn't appear anywhere in the book. But that's the tip of the iceberg of what Dennis saw and experienced. He says a woman he supervised lost her job simply because she was a woman. He says he lost his job because he and other administrators were successful in making the Master's Seminary less about MacArthur and more about a quality education. Dennis also has insight into the alleged 40 hours a week that MacArthur claims he worked at the school for many years. And Dennis says the culture of fear and intimidation reported by the accrediting body that put the Master's University and Seminary on probation is real. This is going to be an eye-opening interview, and I'm so excited to dive into these topics with Dennis. But first, I'd like to thank the sponsors of this podcast, Judson University and Marquardt of Barrington. Judson is a top-ranked Christian university providing a caring community and an excellent college experience. Plus, the school offers more than 60 majors, great leadership opportunities, and strong financial aid. Judson University is shaping lives that shape the world. For more information, just go to judsonu.edu.
All right, we got to break in there after let her get her sponsors out of the way first. All right. Oh boy. Okay. So here's where we got to deal with this, all right? It's an ex-employee. Now, the person had been there, 20 years? So obviously he can speak from his experience, but he lost his job. So an ex-employee who lost his job could be motivated to speak negatively of his past employer since he lost his job. So we've got to take that into account. Now, for me, the biggest part of this scandal that has been developing and kind of been bubbling to the surface over the last 6 months to a year, are these accusations when it comes to, say, some of MacArthur's books and the MacArthur Study Bible, that he did not write, and some are claiming he did not write a single word. Not a single word, and many of those books are in the John MacArthur Study Bible. John MacArthur's name appears on the cover, and if you have a copy of the John MacArthur Study Bible in your house, go find it right now, open it up. My copy of the John MacArthur Study Bible is currently back at my house. I did have it here at the church because we've talked about this before, but if you open it up, it says John MacArthur, I think it says author and editor, I think is, or author and general editor, I think is the way it states in the cover of the John MacArthur Study Bible. Now, if it states that, and MacArthur did not write a word in the John MacArthur Study Bible, let's say if that is true, then right there, to me, that is a scandal. That is dishonest, that's disingenuous, that is just wrong. That's wrong, wrong, wrong. And there's a lot of this, and supposedly, I don't know how deep this problem runs, but I have heard that there's a lot of this goes on within Christianity. You get these kind of so-called celebrity pastors, throw their name on the book, and then you may have a ghostwriter who actually writes the book. Well, if that is the case, that's not right. That goes to that. Forget John MacArthur at this point. Forget Julie Roys at this point. This goes to the Christian publishing world. If someone's name appears on that book, you're making the claim that the contents of that book came from that person. That person wrote it. That person did so. And there should be something clearly stated on the cover, John MacArthur's book written by someone else. I mean, there's got to be something. I know that's not going to sell any copies, but there's got to be something. So who actually wrote the study notes in the John MacArthur Study Bible? If it wasn't John MacArthur, why is his name on it? Is that a Christian publishing thing? They're like, hey, we need to put your name on this so we can sell these study notes. And I my feelings. You should never have a Bible with a pastor's name on it. No, it should just be, here's a Bible that contains study notes. To me, just don't even do that. Just publish the Bible, and then in a separate publication, like in a book, study notes from John MacArthur, study notes from Chuck Swindoll, study notes. Don't put it in the Bible. Just have the Bible, here's the Word of God, and then here are study notes from some man. And then just have a little booklet that people can buy and have with their Bible. People say, but it's more convenient to have it in the Bible. Yes, but you're placing a human being's name, a sinful human being's name on top of basically, it's like the MacArthur Study Bible. MacArthur's name takes the preeminence. That just bothers me just from the symbolism of it. It's elevating the person. The person is getting the preeminence. When you open the Bible, what should get the preeminence is the Word of God, not any person, no matter how great they are, no matter how doctrinally sound they may be. Remove the celebrity from the Word of God. Here's the Word of God, and then the celebrity person comes along, and here's my little booklet that has study notes on the Word of God. It's used, you can use this it's a companion to the Bible, but I'm not going to put my notes in the Bible. I just think there's got to be a different way of thinking, but any criticism of that, everyone looks at you like you're crazy and that you're just making a big deal out of nothing. But I think it's a big deal. Leave the Word of God alone. Leave it alone. But if in a situation you've got your name on a Bible, and then inside that Bible it claims that you're the author and you didn't write any of it, that's reaching to a whole new level. So we'll see. There's been lots of claims about MacArthur not writing any of this. Now, to me, someone from Grace Community Church, someone from Grace to You, someone should be able to just end this controversy. They should just be able to end this controversy. It should be like, no, I wrote this. But you're not going to say that if the people who actually wrote the notes, if they're out there and alive, they're going to come out and say, no, you did not. So then how is this going to play out? These claims keep bubbling up, and I'm just waiting. I'm hoping that it can be resolved quietly, calmly, behind closed doors, and everyone can move on. But if someone doesn't handle this right, it's going to blow up and it could get really, really ugly. And just let's remember, Mark Driscoll, main reason he was brought down was plagiarism. Had a name on a book, and inside that book contains the works and the words of someone else. Now, in that particular case, there was no agreement made with the other person, it appears. But Driscoll was basically acting like the words were his own. And, well, If MacArthur, even if you worked out an agreement with someone, they're not your words. So why is the Christian publishing world okay with this if that's the case? We'll see. So that's to me the big claim. Now, a lot of the other claims are going to be made. Some of those, I don't even know if they can be proven. It's going to be this ex-employees' words against the people from MacArthur's ministry. I don't know if you can ever get to the bottom of that. But to me, who wrote these books? That's important. I got MacArthur's commentaries right here in front of me. I got 2 of them. Are those the words of MacArthur? Those are the words of someone else. Now, I think they're just edited sermons, and you could argue should that be made clear when you buy a commentary? Hey, these are just the edited sermons. I think most people know that if a pastor writes a commentary, it's just coming from his sermons. I think most people know that. So that's I don't think there's a big an issue with that. But if it's if other things are not written by you, we'll see. We'll just see where it goes. I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think it out. I'm trying to think out loud about all the different directions these issues could go. But I think there needs to be a reckoning within the Christian publishing world about some of this. All right, here we go.
Also, if you're looking for a quality new or used car, I highly recommend my friends at Marquardt of Barrington. Marquardt is a Buick GMC dealership where you can expect honesty, integrity, and transparency. That's because the owners there, Dan and Kurt Marquardt, are men of integrity. To check them out, just go to buyacar123.com. Well, again, joining me is Dennis Swanson, an education administrator and former vice president at the Master's Seminary. For more than 2 decades, Dennis worked at both the seminary and the Master's University. He started as director of innovation, then he became the librarian, then the director of accreditation, and finally the vice president of operations, library, and accreditation. So Dennis has seen a lot over the years, and I'm so pleased to have him in studio with me today. Dennis, welcome, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And you're in studio. You're not usually in the Chicago area. What brings you here?
I'm exploring some job opportunities, and I think I may be relocating to this area. And I love Chicago, so I could walk around and take pictures all day.
Well, welcome to the Chicago area. If you end up in this area, it'll be fun to have you here. But again, we've talked quite a bit over the past year about your experience with John MacArthur, with the Masters University and Seminary. And again, you were there for over 2 decades. So you must have, in the early days, in the 1990s, early 2000s, enjoyed being there. Tell me what it was like in those early days.
My first year and a half was at the college. Back then, it wasn't the university. That's a later invention. But I worked with a guy named Doug Bookman, and we worked on innovation, ideas. And so anything to make the school better, to make the programs better, to come up with new ideas, that's kind of what we explored. And at the same time, it gave me an opportunity to teach once in a while, which I always enjoyed doing. And then I was approached by Dr. Dick Mayhew, who is the dean at the seminary, and asked if I would like to come back to the seminary. I had graduated from the seminary and come and be the librarian. It was busy for the first year because I had to actually get a degree in library work. So I enrolled at San Jose State University, and I finished another master's degree in 2 semesters. And then Dr. Mayhew again asked if I would help with accreditation. I said, sure, I'll give it a try. And
that's been a big deal, accreditation.
Oh, accreditation is a huge deal.
Very big deal.
The WASC, which is the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, was our regional accreditor. And they had just started a new program called Assessment Leadership Academy for leaders. And so I was in the first group of that with about 12 other people in the region.
Well, we're going to talk more about accreditation. So let's table that discussion, because you left in 2015. In 2018 was when WASC put the Masters University and Seminary on probation. So part of the reason we're talking is because John MacArthur is in the news right now.
Sure.
And I have done some reporting on him. And so there's a lot of people asking what's really going on at the Masters University and Seminary, what's really going on at Grace Community Church, at Grace to You with John MacArthur. So let me just ask you, what was it like working with John MacArthur, and, what kind of president was he? Because he was the president of the seminary when you were there.
John wasn't so much for us day to day. We didn't see him a lot. John was, you're always wondering, when he would come in, it would be kind of like a whirlwind, and what was he going to do today, and what was going to happen? And you kind of just held your breath until he came and left.
You told me at one point when we were talking that you literally would go months and wouldn't see John.
Oh, you could go months without seeing him. You'd see him at, some events and certainly at graduation. But then in terms of regular meetings with the faculty, in 20 years, 3 or 4.
And you said there was an annual retreat that the seminary would do?
We would begin the year with a faculty retreat. Usually in the spring, we would have kind of end of the year dinner with everybody.
Okay, so he's the president. Was he there?
For the retreats, almost never. For the annual dinners, he might show up, but a lot of times he didn't show for those either. And it was always, very busy with everything else, or traveling, or doing whatever it is he was doing. But it wasn't something he did very much.
Part of the reason I ask is that from 2006 through 2012, if you read the 990s, which are the IRS tax forms that they file every year, they claimed that MacArthur was working 40 hours a week from 2006 to 2012 for 6 years, supposedly, and this would have been 6 years you were there. It says he worked 40 hours a week at the seminary.
Not possible, unless he counted working at home or doing things. But in terms of being in the office, no, he was never there. He had a little room in the seminary building, but it was just a place where he could have meetings. His main office was just, 50 yards away over at the church, but he didn't even have an office in the building.
So as president, what was his role?
Raise money. When he would speak, he would promote the school and do things like that. But in terms of an active administrative role, I would say he had virtually none.
One of the things that has raised some eyebrows is the fact that he takes 3 salaries at the Masters University and Seminary. He was taking a salary there from $42,000 a year to $100K to $182,000 some years. Grace to You, he's taking a salary of $174,000 to over $402,000. The one year that he got that King James Bible that I guess was worth more than $200,000 that Grace to You gifted him. Were you aware of him taking these multiple salaries at the time that you were there?
No idea.
Were you aware of, like, when he was at Grace Community Church, was that considered a full-time job? Because the other ones were part-time.
He'd always say that he'd spent 40 hours a week on each message they preached. After a while, you take that with a grain of salt. There's only so many days in the week and hours, and he couldn't be 40 hours a week at 5 different places or anything like that.
I mentioned in 2012, John MacArthur made as much as, it was over $400,000 from Grace to You, gave them this salary. But it was a little bit bigger that year because he got this $200,000 King James Bible. Now, the narrative that's come out by Phil Johnson is that this Bible was given to MacArthur for, as an anniversary year, and we wanted to thank him for this. But he's not a very good miser because he turned around right away and gave it away to the Masters University and Seminary. I've discovered that it doesn't show up on the 990s till 4 years later in 2016 is when there's a gift of a historical artifact to the seminary. Doesn't look like he turned around and gave it away, but something. In fact, you sent me a picture, which I'll post, that shows that, 2012 is when you took that picture.
Yes.
And at that point, what did that note say, and what does that say about the intention of John MacArthur with that Bible?
We created a room, kind of a museum of rare Bibles, and we had his Bible, and I created little cards for them to talk about the Bible and what it was. His Bible was a He Bible, which is the rarer of the two. They said it was $200,000. I might quibble that would not be a great assessment of that in that year, but I had to put on the bottom of that card that on loan from John MacArthur. It wasn't given to the school.
So you actually were told to put that note there.
Yes, that's how they wanted it worded, that this was on loan from Dr. MacArthur, his personal collection or whatever it was.
All right, I got to throw in a couple of thoughts really quick. Some of these issues, on one hand, they look like insignificant. Okay, was he at the seminary? Was he not at the seminary? How many hours did he wasn't at the retreat. He didn't show up there. Look, I've got to be very careful not to be critical because I am not the social one either, right? If there were some of these activities, I wouldn't be there either because I would prefer to be either behind a microphone, doing a podcast, or studying, or reading, or doing other things. So in that sense, you can pick on, he's the president, there's a retreat, why wasn't he there? Okay. And you could, he wasn't very personable, he was never around, he didn't talk to people, he was kind of cut off from everyone, he wasn't very social. You can criticize people like that. And there are a lot of people who, and I think a lot of times in some cases, I can't speak for all preachers, but I think there's certain kinds of preachers. I think there are some preachers who are very people-minded, right? They would rather not be in an office studying theology or the Bible. They would rather be talking to people about their lives, around people, having meals with people, and they're much more the people-driven kind of pastor. And then there's others who are far more doctrine, theology, they want to teach, and that comes down to personality. And you got to try to ensure that your strength does not become your weakness, or that you got to try to balance it out. And it's difficult. And I think every pastor struggles with, what should I do and how I do it. And I think over time, the longer you're a pastor, the more jaded you can become because you realize no matter what you do, people are still going to get mad and they're still going to leave. You could spend every waking hour at every event under the sun. You could hang out with them. And guess what? When they get tired of you, they're going to just walk right out the door and leave you. And they're not going to care. So at some point you realize, you know what? What's my ultimate responsibility? Teach the Word of God. I'm going to focus on that because all the other stuff, no matter what I do, they're still going to walk away. Now that becomes a very jaded and dangerous. You got to try to protect yourself from thinking that way. But these are some struggles that a pastor has. So a lot of this comes down to personality and, whatever. So we should not judge that. But the issue comes down what they're filing in the IRS reports. And that's where the situation starts getting kind of ugly. If you got people out there going through the IRS reports and the things you're filing, and you're like, wait a minute, you claim to have worked this many hours at the seminary and everyone there never sees you, and you're claiming to be working 40 hours a week, and yet you're telling everyone at church that 40 hours a week to prepare your sermon. Well, how are you working 40 hours a week to prepare your sermon, 40 hours a week working at the seminary, and supposedly working 20, 30, 40 hours a week at the Grace to You radio ministry? That's 40, 80. I'm not really good at math, but that's a whole lot of hours that I don't know if that's really turning out to be true. The issue is what you're claiming on those IRS reports. Now this gets into finance, legality, IRS, taxes. There's a whole lot of issues. That's where the situation really gets serious. Your personal preference of where you think he should be and what he should be doing, that's one thing. But what you're filing on those IRS reports now comes down to an issue of honesty, integrity, truthfulness versus deceit, dishonesty. That's where it becomes a major issue. Making a claim that you get a Bible worth all this money and that you immediately turned around and gave it away, and then the people are like, no, I was instructed on the card to say it was on loan here, again, goes to the question of honesty. So we got to make sure we separate personality, the way someone's personality is, and what how they're social or not social, where they're kind of standoffish. You got to be careful how you judge people that way. I've had people in my church who, if you look at them, they seem always, you think they hate your guts. You think they were mad at you. You think they hate your guts, and sometimes they're the most loyal and supportive. And then the one who's always like, "Hey, pastor, you're awesome. We love you," is the one that 3 seconds later we're like, stab you in the back 37 times. So you can't judge people based off that personality type. People are just different when it comes to social interaction, what they prefer. So we don't want to judge that kind of thing. But making a claim that you're working, no one sees you, and you're claiming on tax documents that you're working 40 hours a week, now that may be true that he's working 40 hours a week, because when you merge all of these three things, you got the seminary, you got the church, and you got Grace to You radio program. 3 separate entities. There's already a problem there. Okay, well, they should all just be under the church. They should just be all under the church. I think that would, but maybe you have to separate them for tax purposes. I don't know. See, the more money that comes in, the more complicated these issues become. Money always creates tax issues. That's where this becomes a problem. So then how do you, if you're going to take 3 separate salaries from 3 separate organizations, well, then you've got to somehow demonstrate that you worked so many hours in order to earn that pay. That's where it becomes a problem. Now, this could just be, they just need to find a better way to manage that, and that's an issue. Why isn't the seminary and Grace to You under the church? They should just be extensions of the ministry of the church, and you should just get one salary from the church. That, to me, would be simple, but I don't know tax. He's probably got tax attorneys going, no, we need to separate these for these reasons. Maybe that's why. I don't know. So these are things that the MacArthur side could clarify and help us understand. But that's the issue here. Just we got to separate the 2 concepts. All right, here we go.
That was still in place in 2015 when I left.
Right.
It was never given to the seminary that I was aware of it. When it was, I guess it was ultimately given. That was after I was gone.
Well, and it was also after 2014 when these bloggers started blogging about John MacArthur's salary and how much Grace to You had paid him.
Sure.
His lifestyle, did it raise any red flags at that point?
What raised the red flags was driving money to his son-in-law and his company. When I was running operations at the seminary, I had to hire Corey Welch. I had to hire his company to do something, but working with them was not an enjoyable experience. The end product wasn't anything to get excited about, but there's certain things you didn't have a choice about.
So let's talk about Corey Welch. Mm-hmm. He's John MacArthur's son-in-law,
yes,
as you mentioned. He was a Grace to You employee in 2008, working for about $80,000 as an employee, as the director of the television broadcasting there. Then in 2009, he started working as a video production contractor for Grace to You, getting more than $740,000 per year for doing production of Grace to You, what he had been doing before. I'm not sure. I've heard from Phil Johnson, who's the executive director of Grace to You, that it was cost efficient to have him move into that. But I mean, if you just look at the salary he was making,
Right.
I mean, obviously there were more costs than just his salary for production, but that's a lot of money.
Yeah, well, it is. And he formed his own company, I guess, and Welch Productions, and then continued as a contractor doing what he had been getting paid to do before.
What year was this?
Early 2014. We remodeled the front lobby of the seminary. He was contracted to make a video wall with big screen TVs and produce the slideshow, which ended up being little more than a PowerPoint. I mean, I could have gotten any 20 college kids probably do the same thing. The annoying part for me was I continued hounding him, basically, give me the specs for the computer system we need to run this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, didn't do it. I'll get back to you. Finally gave me the specs. Well, they were wrong. So I ended up with a very nice computer that wasn't powerful enough to do what we needed to do. Had to go out and spend another, I couldn't return it. Ended up spending another $12,000 or $15,000 on the right system, which just drove the cost up for my budget, but didn't affect what we paid him.
How much did you pay him?
I have no idea. That part of it was off of the budget.
Okay.
So it was whatever he got paid, he got paid.
So your impression of Corey as the quality of the work that he produced, because I mean, this has been a key point that Phil Johnson has made is, hey, listen, you shouldn't have a problem with us hiring Corey Welch because he does such outstanding work.
That's not my experience. My experience was adequate work, rarely on time, and kind of slowed the whole process down more than anything. I was never impressed with his work.
So it's interesting to me.
This is, and there is no easy solution to this. When Christian ministries get big, it's amazing how much money is just flowing in and through the ministries, right? How much money, let's hire this person and pay him that much money. And we got to hire someone to do this. And we got to hire someone to do this. It would probably, the average church member who just comes in, sits in the pew and puts money in an offering plate, I don't know if they can even comprehend sometimes how much money flows through some of these ministries. And when you start hiring someone related to you, then obviously charges of nepotism is going to come into play. Why is this person getting hired? And then if people don't feel like he's doing a good job, that's always the problem with hiring a family member. That's always problematic because the people then can have issues with them. So some of that may sound a little personal. I don't know, but it's just when you start hearing some of those, they're just throwing out these dollar amounts like it's no big deal. A couple of 100,000 here, 100,000 here. It's just staggering to me how much money can flow through ministries. And that's once they become that big and that much money gets involved, that's when it just gets disturbing. It just seems like it stops becoming what maybe the Bible intended it to be, and it becomes something bigger. It becomes a business. And now everyone's got monetary motivation to keep that ministry going, protect that ministry, because there's lots of money connected to it. And there's no easy way to work around this. I mean, Grace to You, you got Grace Community, then you got Grace to You, the radio ministry. And again, years ago, I started looking, I think way back when MacArthur originally, when the sermons were put online, they cost you, I think $1, I think it was $1, $2 to download. I think it was $1 to download per sermon. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So then I, started looking into some of the financials. And I'm like, wait, Grace to You brings in like over $1 million a year for a radio ministry? And all that radio ministry is John MacArthur's sermons? So the sermon is preached at Grace Community Church. Someone just takes that. They're sent to the radio stations, probably in a digital file, and then they just play it at a specific timetable. Most Christian radio stations don't charge the ministry for being on the air. So what's the cost? Why do you need $1 million to run a radio program. We were on the radio, and it didn't cost us $1 million. It cost us, I think, what was it that we had to pay to be on radio? I think it was like $50 a week, or it was something. It was pretty insignificant amount, and we didn't ask for donations on our radio program. So, I mean, sometimes you just look at this and like, where's all this money? Just so much money just comes pouring in, and then. So what you've got all this money. Okay, well, here's a family member, hey, it's my son-in-law. I want my daughter to be taken care of. Well, let's hire him. And then my daughter is taken care of. You can see that there could be like a motivation to hire him, maybe even overlook maybe a shortcoming. But it's just so much money comes in and out of some of these situations. And you're like, what is going on here? But I don't know how you manage that. See, it's beyond my comprehension how to manage that. I'm a pastor of a little small church in the middle of nowhere with very little money. I don't know. I don't even know how much money we have in the bank at any given time. I don't know. I have to ask I have to ask people in the church, how much money do we have? Okay. What do we have? Okay. And I don't know. So I don't have to manage all of that kind of issue. So it's easy for me to sit and criticize that. I don't know what I would do. How do you do it in such a way where it feels like it's ministry and it's not a business? How do you work that? And when you bring in the seminary aspect of it, that is basically becomes a business. How do you run the seminary where it becomes a ministry? I mean, that's why I hate the whole seminary industrial complex. I'm opposed to it. If men want to be trained for ministry, they should be trained within the local church. That pastor should train them. Right? And then maybe send them off to maybe a school, maybe for some study in Greek or Hebrew if they want to get an advanced degree in that. But I think this whole seminary system is just another way to make money off Christianity. I mean, look, I've known pastors who've got 8 years of education, but when you hear them preach from the pulpit, I don't know what was the point of getting the 8 years of education, because their teaching is not that in depth. So what was the point? I mean, go to seminary to learn all of this deep theological important issues and then never preach it to the people in the church. What's the point? Other than you can put on your wall that you've got a degree, which I guess then you can demand more money from the church because you can say, wait, I've got 2 degrees. You should pay me more. I guess maybe you could do it for that reason, but that just seems there's got to be a better system. All right, let's continue.
Because I just looked this up, because any kind of payments to, say, a son-in-law is considered a related business transaction, should show up on the 990s. You're telling me that Corey Welch did work in 2014. Melinda Welch did some work as well, and it doesn't show up on the 990s.
Their salaries and their contract was paid outside of my authority within the budget. And I ran operations, but that part of it was handled, we'll take care of that. And it was done elsewhere.
Okay. So let's talk about books.
Okay.
Because you were involved in a lot of the writing of these books that John MacArthur's name is on. In fact, you told me one time that John MacArthur has never actually written a book in his life. Is that right?
That's my opinion. Yeah. I know who the ghostwriters are, and I know who wrote even the earliest books. He was an English professor. He was I can't remember his name. He was a Reformed Episcopal minister, but he wrote the early books, and they were sermons.
So they're taking the sermons and sort of
massaging them and putting them in some readable order. And that's kind of when Phil Johnson came in. He had been an editor, I think, at Moody Press, and then he came in to do the Gospel According to Jesus, and one thing led to another, and he ghost wrote several books after that. And there's another person right after that who's Nathan Busnitz, who was the ghost wrote. He wrote books out of whole cloth. There was no underlying sermon series behind it.
You're saying there's no part of it that was John MacArthur?
Other than maybe him looking at it and saying, yeah, that looks good.
You weren't involved firsthand in those other books, but you were in the MacArthur Study Bible?
We got different sections assigned to us, different books of the Bible, and we'd create notes, and then Dick Mayhew would edit them and put them together. And then, I mean, the process was supposed to be then John carefully looked at each one and, changed the wording and that was not what I saw.
What did you see?
I saw him appear every other week or so for a half hour, 45 minutes in this little room where Dick had taken a little conference room and created where the study Bible is produced. The study Bible, in my view, was 80% Dick Mayhew taking the stuff that the seminary had created, re-editing it, and John doing something. But I mean, the idea that he looked at every single note and checked them all, I rather doubt that happened.
Is that unusual, though, in the publishing business?
I guess for big name authors and things like that, it might not be unusual. I question it ethically at a certain level. If everyone thinks you did this and you really didn't, and you don't really do anything to dissuade people of that fact, I mean, it took a lot of work. And you can't write a note on every single verse, and you have to figure out what's what, and then go through and then all of us had our own expertise in different areas, and we would look and, what would be something useful in this area.
So did you write a portion of it?
I redid a lot of the notes in Proverbs that had to be taken a look at. And I went through and checked the notes I used to teach the archaeology class, so I checked the notes on archaeology and suggested a few here and there that occurred. And, some of them are there.
You did actually write a chapter, though, as I understand, in a counseling book.
Yeah, there were 3 books in a series that I think Word ended up publishing them. One was a book on preaching. Another one was on pastoral ministry, and then there was a book on counseling. And a guy named Wayne Mack, who was the professor of counseling at the college at the time, was kind of the lead editor. It was one of those John MacArthur, Wayne Mack, and the college faculty, just like the preaching book was the seminary faculty. I did a lot of the editing, just, proofreading and things like that. And then I did one chapter where I compiled it. It was a frequently asked question chapter. I wrote some of the answers, and a lot of the contributors answered it as well. And it came out, and it was well done. It was well received. I think they still use it as a textbook. And then, about 2 years later, the book was being reissued. I think they tinkered with the title. I think they changed all of the titles of those slightly and reissued them. And when the new one came out, and I'm working in the library, so I see a lot of the new books. And so, the new counseling book came out. And I said, let me look at it. And I'm skimming through it. And I come to the chapter that I had done, and my name wasn't there anymore. It was now John MacArthur.
Just like that.
Just like that. I complained a little bit, but it was already printed. What were they going to do? And I never got any kind of explanation as to why that was done or who did it or anything else. It just, my name disappeared.
And did you get royalties?
No, the contributors all got a stipend to originally produce whatever it is they produced. Mm-hmm. And then...
and who paid the stipend?
Oh, gosh, I think the check to me came from the school.
From the school.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, and we don't know the answer to this question, but there's this whole issue of intellectual property and who owns what.
Right.
If you were paid by the Masters University, then they should own that intellectual property of the book, and whether or not John got royalties on that or not. And I guess we don't know. All we know is that Phil Johnson recently said that John MacArthur makes millions in royalties.
I'm certain he does.
You did tell me about a project, though, while you were there, this hymnal project.
Oh, gosh,
and Grace to You, as I understand it, would buy tons of copies of books, and that would often put them on the bestseller list if they were bought. Were they bought through Amazon?
I just assumed they would get them as directly from the publisher. So I don't know how they accounted for that.
So if you do get it directly from the publisher, it doesn't count for your sales, and you do get it at a fraction of the cost.
Right, and I'm sure that's what they did for a lot of them. I
would
think
hope so.
Grace to You used them as giveaways and different things, but it always struck me odd. We couldn't find a hymnal we liked, so we created our own. They're working on a Bible translation now. We don't like
the Legacy Bible.
The Legacy Bible. We don't have any. There's no Bibles we like, so we're going to create our own. Well, and they said they have 6 people that have been working for a year to translate the Bible. Well, it's impossible. That's just silly. It's an old New American Standard that they're tinkering with the wording, and that's all. I've seen the sample that they've just put up on the webpage, and that's all it is. It's not what the King James took all those guys, 13 years to produce. The NASB originally, I think, took 7 or 8 years of 40 people working on it. The idea that 6 people working a year are going to create a whole new Bible translation is just absurd. And I don't see the point in it. Why do you have to create something that's already done?
Let's talk accreditation, because that's something that you worked on. And from
Now, I wish they would have gone in far more detail about the books. Yes, if a book is basically his sermon that an editor comes, cleans it up, and publishes it, that's one thing. Now, I still think it needs to be stated, hey, these are, based off sermons, but that's okay. I remember, again, I've told the story. MacArthur released these books. One was on spiritual warfare. One was like on the family. One was like on anxiety. I can't remember what they were, these little small like paperback books. And I remember, I think this is the first time it really hit me. And he did one on Bible study. Yeah, that was it, on Bible study. And I remember getting the one on Bible study. It was published to go along with the release of the John MacArthur Study Bible. And I remember getting it, and when I read it, I was a little disturbed by, number one, it felt like that the book was really published to promote. It was like, here's a book on how to study the Bible, and basically the solution was buy a John MacArthur Study Bible. Really, it was there to promote the John MacArthur Study Bible. So that already bothered me. But as I started going through it, I was like, well, wait a minute. This is from a sermon series he did, like, I think I heard in the 1980s on how to study the Bible. So then I started realizing, wait, some of these books are just his sermons. So I started catching on at that point. Now, you didn't have access to all the sermons back then, right? So you could only hear the sermon that you would hear on radio. That's basically the only way you could get the sermons. And then ultimately, MacArthur, they had a tape subscription service where you could pay so much a month and you would get tapes of the sermons sent to your house. We did that for like a little while just to see what it was like. But again, you're paying to get sermons. So just, again, there were so many different ways they brought in money on this. But so once I started realizing, wait, some of these books are just the sermons. Well, if I can get the sermons, I'll just listen to the sermon. Why spend my money on the books? But I don't have as much of an issue with that because it's still MacArthur's. I mean, it's his sermons. It's his sermons. Now, whoever the editor is and whoever did it needs to be clearly acknowledged in the book. And I think in the very front of the book, you can just say, hey, this book was produced over the sermons that was preached from this date to this date. These sermons are available in this format, or this book will give you basically taking those sermons and have been edited by this individual. I think you should state that just being above board and being honest and making it clear. But if the John MacArthur Study Bible, if he didn't do anything for the most part, and other people wrote those notes, and then you look at the front of the study Bible and he's listed as the author and editor, and then we played a clip from MacArthur talking about how many hours and hours and hours he spent working on each note, and it took him a year to recover from all of the hard work. If that's not true, that's, to me, is the troubling part. That's the problematic part. Some of these things are just personality issues and differences. You've got financial issues and you've got integrity issues and Christian publishing issues. If the MacArthur Study Bible, he had basically nothing to do with it. That is a major, major problem. And we'll have to see if there's any ultimate fallout from all of this. And if there's other books that he didn't do, like, he didn't do anything. Someone actually just wrote the whole thing and it wasn't even based off sermons. That is massively problematic. So that, to me, is the real possible disturbing thing here. But let me make it very clear. To me, it's more about the Christian publishing world, more than about MacArthur, because the Christian publishing world, they have a financial interest in selling books. They've got to sell books. And they know that they cannot sell these books unless they have a celebrity pastor's name on the cover. So there is a financial motivation to maybe not play loose with the facts and get someone's name on it, because that's the only way they're going to sell. And that is the reality. And that is where everyone needs to take a hard look at that kind of thing, right? Because everybody wants to talk about the problem with celebrity pastors. Well, the issue goes much deeper than just the fact that you have celebrity pastors. It's the underlying industry that has created look, celebrity, you have a celebrity and then an industry is built around that celebrity. And with that industry comes a whole lot of money. money pouring in via donations, money pouring in through royalties, money putting in because you sell this, you sell that, you sell this, you sell that. I mean, you just get one popular book from a celebrity pastor that turns into Bible study guides, devotionals, DVD series. It turns into all kinds of merchandise. And then you sell that, and I'll use it, in the wrestling world, we call it selling merch. You got to sell that merch because in the wrestling world, many of the wrestlers, the indie wrestlers, make their money by the merch they sell. Well, sadly, within Christianity, there's merch. We got to sell that merchandise, and you just put that celebrity's name on it, and you push the merchandise, and that is a deeper problem. That's a deeper problem that goes beyond MacArthur. So don't just, I don't think MacArthur did anything wrong. Look, there's some questions here about how the Christian publishing world works, and I think we should be bothered by it. We should be very upfront and honest about whose book that really is, who wrote it, what is actually in it. And I think that is troubling, right? I know we're at an hour, but we're going to try to finish this because I don't want to do a part 2 here. All right, let's continue.
Discussing this with you, and I don't know anything to the contrary of this. In 2008, the school was doing great. And then you went from great accreditation in 2008 to being on probation in 2018, which was 3 years after you left. Mm-hmm. But one of the things, and I've read the report, the WASC report, which is the accrediting body, and one of the things that they really highlight is what they said was a culture of fear and intimidation at the school. And that they seem to have tied that directly to MacArthur. They also complained that he was not working full-time at the school, and for a school that size and what needs to be done with accreditation and everything else, it needs a full-time administrator at the top. So, I mean, talk about that. Did you feel a culture of fear and intimidation?
To a degree.
Now, we got to stop right here. Yes, they did get put on probation. Yes, there is a report. Those are all facts, right? The school did get put on probation. Now, here's my thing with seminaries and accreditation. Here's my thing. When you go to seminary, why does a school want accreditation? What is their motivation? You're getting a degree in theology, in biblical studies. Is it accreditation because you can convince the students that they're getting a better education? And the reason I call this all into question, I've gone to schools with accreditation. Grace University in Omaha, Nebraska, that has an accreditation. The Catholic University that I attended, an accredited school. I think Moody Bible Institute, that may be accredited. I can't remember. There's a number of schools I went to that were accredited, right? And then I went to little Bible institutes that had no accreditation, didn't seek any accreditation, didn't care about any accreditation. And guess where in some cases I got a far better Bible education. The little Bible Institute with 5 guys on a Saturday morning, sitting there being there from Saturday morning, like 8 a.m. to Saturday, evening around 5 or 6 p.m., being there all day and just studying the Bible, talking the Bible, taking tests, preaching, all the different things that we would do. Some cases that was far much of superior education, so much better, just a million times better. And in the big accredited schools, it was like, okay, here's what you got to do. Move. You got to get this done because, this semester is going to be over. And it was about just, here's the task to complete to get the grade so that you get the degree. Not about really a Bible education, I felt, in many cases. Now, other people may have a different experience, but I just felt that the Bible institutes and the small Bible colleges that I would attend always seemed like the desire was to really train you and teach you the scriptures more than, hey, look, you're getting a degree with our name on it. Look at that. And so I don't get the whole accreditation thing. Is the accreditation thing so that you can charge more money for that education? Maybe. Now, look, I understand if you're getting a degree in other areas of study, you need that accreditation when it comes to getting a job and maybe other things. But for a pastor, I mean, maybe a large church won't hire you unless you have a degree from an accredited university. But Joel Osteen, who's the pastor of one of the largest churches in America, he didn't even go to Bible college or seminary, from my understanding. So he clearly doesn't have an accredited degree from a Bible from a seminary or a Bible college. So clearly there are big churches who don't care what you have. All right. So and again, I just. You spend 4 years to go to an accredited school. You get in all kinds of crazy debt to go to that school. And then you got to go find a job at a church. That means you're not going to go look for the small churches because you're still paying off your school debt. And so the small churches suffer because they can't pay, this person who's in debt. And then it just seems like you get to this church and you start preaching. And it's like, how much of that seminary education goes from what you went through all of those tests for, all of that study for, and then how much of that actually comes from the pulpit to the people? So I don't know. I call the whole seminary system into. I just have a problem with the whole thing. That has nothing to do with MacArthur. I'm trying to take each issue and going beyond the MacArthur, so we don't focus on MacArthur. We focus on the bigger issues. What's going on in the Christian publishing world? And I'm just against the whole seminary industrial complex problem as well. And then the school ends up in trouble and gets placed on probation. And the report seems to say there's some major issues going on there. And again, it comes back to he wasn't working full-time at the school. So if he wasn't working full-time on the school, why are you making claim on IRS, tax reports that he was working? So this becomes now a problem about taxes and legality and honesty, which are all major issues.
There was a colleague that Dr. Andy Snyder, who was fired despite the fact that he was universally loved by all of the faculty. He was not loved by Phil Johnson. And that was common knowledge, that was where the attack was coming from, over some arcane theological issue, frankly. But probably starting about 2012. And that's when it really began to get difficult. You walked around kind of on eggshells sometimes, wondering what in the world was going on. There were changes. I remember Dr. MacArthur got rid of his secretary, who had been a secretary for like 25 years. And because they were moving female employees out.
Why? Why were they moving female employees out?
I have no idea. I remember that there was one person that worked for me in the library, my circulation manager. She was the only woman left in the school, the seminary side, who had authority over men, the student workers.
That wasn't okay?
Apparently not, because they fired her.
Just for being a woman?
I don't know exactly why they fired her, but that was mainly the reason. And it was done poorly enough that she sued and won. And I think they settled out of court, but there was a judgment against the school at that point. And it was just, they tried to run the school like it was the church. And they're separate entities. They have separate missions. They have different guidelines. They have all sorts of different ways of doing things. And you can't run a school like you run a church. And it became problematic. They withdrew from the Evangelical Council on Financial Accountability. And they've had trouble since I left with WAS, the accreditors. It's like they don't want any outside entity holding them to the basics of professionalism and standards, and either in higher education or financial dealings or anything like that.
The Masters University and Seminary is accredited by ECFA now.
The schools are. I think the church withdrew.
The church withdrew, exactly. And that's recent, though.
Yeah, that's fairly recent. And at what point will the schools withdraw? I mean, it's a very inward growing isolation. I mean, we have to have our own hymnal. We're going to have our own Bible. We have our own school. We're going to watch it ourselves. It's becoming very insular. In terms of education, that's very worrisome. I was looking at the list of faculty.
I guess the one big takeaway I have from a lot of this, and again, some of this can just be personal issues in the workplace, but here's what I would like to say. I just think it's interesting You take what happens in the work world, in the secular work world, where you have personal conflict, you have fighting and backbiting and gossip and all the things that happen in the work world, in the secular world, and then you go work in a Christian world, in a Christian organization, and guess what you find? Personal conflict, people being fired, people suing, backbiting, gossip, slander, motivations. You have the exact same thing, which is why I get so tired that Christianity sells itself that, hey, become a Christian and whoa, you're a new creature in Christ. Old things are passed away, all things have become new. And they teach that it refers to our practical life, that we're completely new and that we now have the power to obey God and we have the power to be holy. And we say that in a practical way. And guess what you find in the lives of people, no matter which Christian organization you go to, no matter if you're working in a Christian radio station, a Christian bookstore, a church, no matter where you work, guess what? You've got the same sinful nonsense that goes on in the secular world happening inside Christian organizations. Because you know what? Positionally, I'm a new creature in Christ, and old things have passed away, and behold, all things are new. I am to view a Christian as a new creature, but practically, you are a sinner. You still sin. You still have the same issues that you had, and to act like that they just magically go away is just nonsense. And whenever someone starts digging into these ministries, guess what they find? People getting fired, backbiting, people are bitter, people are upset, there's personal vendetta against one another. You find the same issues. They just cover it up, make it all look nice and neat and put a smile on everyone's face, but those underlying issues are right there. It is sad, but it's the reality. And until we start acknowledging that reality, the reality will never change, because everyone convinced that somehow, it's different than it really is. So it's just, when you hear some of this stuff, you're just like, oh boy, here we go. Same kind of nonsense that goes on in the world. Here's a woman who gets fired. They fired her wrong, sued. Let's settle out of court. So that nobody knows. We got problems with the accreditation. We withdraw from the organization that's supposed to hold us accountable financially. We got people trying to position this. You got people trying to get position. And it's just, ugh. You just want to wash your hands of all of it. But that's what happens when you build these little mini empires that has lots of money, and you have lots of people, and you have all these different, like, okay, we're separate from this. Let's run it this way. And it just gets uglier and uglier and uglier. It gets more and more ugly by the second. All right, we'll try to finish this up.
For the seminary now, and it's mostly people that graduated from there. It's a large number they've got all their degrees there. And that's not the way education's supposed to work.
I don't mean to be inflammatory, but to use this word will sound inflammatory. And I'm only asking because a number of people I've talked to who have come from either the Masters or Grace Community Church seem to be afraid to speak on the record, a lot of them.
Sure.
But they describe it as cult-like. Now, I know one of the characteristics of a cult is it has to teach bad doctrine, and I don't think
not
you can
necessarily.
Well, I've heard that it's not just the control, but usually when it's called a cult, it has that other element, right. and I don't think that could possibly be said of MacArthur. Although some people would. They had this whole controversy of Mark of the Beast, and we're not going to get into that. But yeah, I mean, I don't see any glaring issues. In fact, I have appreciated John MacArthur's preaching. In fact, little known fact that when I was reporting on Harvest Bible Chapel, people were circulating a John MacArthur sermon on 1 Timothy 5:20 about publicly exposing an elder who's sinning, because he preaches very straight up on that, and hardly anybody preaches on that. And so I actually appreciate a lot of the preaching of John MacArthur. But this control and fear that I've seen from people who I've had numerous people really upset about things that are going on, and they'll talk to me, but they won't go on the record. And I'm like, why? You don't go to the church anymore. You're not at the school anymore. And they're like, you don't understand. I'll be ostracized by everyone. Tell me about that dynamic.
They often can't just get rid of people. They have to trash their reputation on the way out. It's like this recent deal with Dr. Horn being dismissed.
Let me just say, because some people listening might not know, but Dr. Sam Horn was brought in less than a year ago to be president of the school, because one of the things when they were put on probation by WASC, one of these issues, again, was John MacArthur serving as president. So he moved to chancellor, and they brought in a full-time president, which was Sam Horn. And Sam, from my understanding, had a stellar reputation at that point.
A great guy, a great experienced educator, school administrator, upfront guy. I have all the respect in the world for him. I've met him a few times, but I have other friends who've known him for 30, 40 years and who are all just outraged. I mean, first of all, you hire somebody and then who you announce to the world, he's the guy, this is going to be our leader going forward. And 9 months later, you're letting him go. I mean, he resigned, he's forced out, I'm sure. And 4 board members are leaving at the same time.
So that really hasn't been reported yet because I can't get anybody to talk to me again.
Right. And that's a shame. And there's the thing about talking is not only ostracizing, but there are a lot of people, they believe in the greater good. Yeah, MacArthur's got his flaws and all of these things, and these things have happened. But, if we attack him or if we expose this, it's going to hurt the whole cause of Christ. So Christianity is going to rise and fall on that. And I don't believe that. I believe in holding people accountable, and if it needs to be called out, it needs to be called out. And what are they going to, they've already fired me. What else? I mean, I'm sure they'll come up with some, horrible stories about me, what a terrible person I was or something. But I've been gone for 6 years. I mean, it's what offends me is how they hurt people on the way out. The poor guy that replaced me in the library, I mean, he lasted for 6 months and then they fired him too. And the lady who worked for me, who they fired, and she at least got some, financial compensation. And with Sam, just letting him go, but then going to chapel to students and saying he has anger issues and all of these terrible things,
And this, by the way, this is on my website. If you go to Julie Roys, ROYS.com, there's a story about Dr. Sam Horn resigning, but I also was given, somebody had recorded the chapel that you're talking about, and Dr. Abner Chow got up in front of chapel, and he essentially said there's qualifications for an elder, and some of these is that he can't be pugnacious, can't be given to outbursts of anger, and now we want this just to stay with us. That's what killed me. It's like I'm going to spread this to hundreds of people in a chapel.
Yeah,
maybe more than hundreds. Maybe I don't know how many. What's a student body at?
Oh, there might have been 400 or 500 there.
400 or 500, and he said this applied to Sam Horn, which was shocking, apparently, to those who knew him, because they're like, this is a man who's proven character. We know this has never happened before. And why he left, maybe you have some insight on that. I'm certainly not getting anything from the school, anything official.
Oh, no. And first of all, I'm not an attorney, but I know something about the HR rules, and what Dr. Chow did was probably actionable. It's slanderous. It affects his ability perhaps to get other employment down the road. What somebody else told me, the first that Dr. Horn knew about this is when he heard the recording. And
the Dr. Horn situation is absolutely insane to me. They bring him in, they get rid of him, and then the next thing you know, it seems like the report was that he resigned, and then the next thing you know, you're in chapel, however many students are there, and like, hey, now just keep this amongst ourselves, all right? But, he was let go. He was gone because he no longer qualifies as an elder, and you have to meet the qualifications of an elder because he was pugnacious. You're pugnacious, boom, you're no longer qualified, you're gone. Well, wait a minute. You can just get rid of someone because they're pugnacious? Well, what about claiming you wrote the study notes in a study Bible and you didn't actually write them? Is lying and deceit possibly, grounds to remove you as an elder? So then why is MacArthur associated with the seminary, right? Is that not? But pugnacious? And why are you bringing it to the students in the chapel? The whole thing, that to me, that whole situation is insane. When I heard the recording, we played the recording, I think we did a broadcast on it, that whole situation, I don't know what's going on there. And look, the fact that people won't come out and be on the record about some of their claims, that bothers me to no end for 2 reasons. One, if someone's going to come to you and they're going to be like, I'm off I'm not dealing with like criminal situation, like sexual assault, child molestation. I'm not talking about that. So let's be very clear here, right? Because I understand why they might not want their name to be out there. And I understand the shame and all of the things I'm not talking about that kind of thing. when something is just going wrong inside a church, I'm not talking about if we're talking about sexual assault of some sort, man, obviously you want those people to go to the authorities. But I'm saying if you're talking about there's just some shady business dealings, financial dealings, there's some shady things going on with claiming to write a book and you didn't write a book, that kind of stuff, and people come forward and they won't go out, be on the record. At that point, I think maybe you just don't report what they're telling you. I think at that point, you just got to leave that alone. If they're not going to put their name on the record about this stuff, I think you got to say, look, if you're not going to tell me, if you're not going to come out on the record and you're not going to stand by your claims and try to prove your claims, then I'm not going to publish or repeat what you're saying. I think there's got to be a better way to vet that kind of information, because anyone can anonymously come up for any big ministry and make all kinds of claims. I used to go there, I was there, and this is what I saw. Okay, well, who are you? Let's prove this. There's got to be some vetting going on. So we got to be careful with that, because anyone can make a claim about anyone. And maybe there's some truth to it, but a lot of times the claims have a lot of untruth to them as well. I know that from personal experience, that someone can make a claim and there's truth there, but there can be a lot of untruth there. Now, what you have to do if you're guilty is you just acknowledge your sin and your fault, and you just deal with it. And you can't always try to worry about, well, wait a minute, that part wasn't true, because that's just, you don't get anywhere. You're not gonna be able to move forward. You just have to acknowledge your mistake and repent and move on. But there's a lot of noise going around. Just remember, if it's anonymous sources who won't come forward, at least be skeptical there, all right? Look, two or three witnesses need to come forward and be named to deal with some of these issues, right? This individual is coming forward and giving the name. The problem is, okay, he's an ex-employee who got fired, and okay, maybe he's got some personal animosity towards some of this. Some of these things he would have to prove. Right? Can you prove that MacArthur didn't write any of those notes? That, to me, is a major issue. That's the thing that bothers me, because you're dealing with a Bible and that MacArthur's name is on, where it claims that he's the author. That, to me, is an issue. All right, we're almost finished. Here we go.
And was horrified, and rightfully so. And no small coincidence that Dr. Chow's now been appointed the interim president. I mean, it's some of the strangest. You couldn't write a novel with these twists and turns and have it make any sense.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, whether the Masters University and Seminary will stay together or be split. I heard that was part of the discussion. Whether John MacArthur will take over as president of one of those, probably the seminary, if any. But at this point, we don't know.
No, and I mean, that's the rumor I've heard, that they want to make the seminary a ministry of the church, separate it from the college, and put it under the control of the elders.
That's John's baby, the seminary.
Take them out from under oversight of WASC.
Which means if you're not accredited, you can't get loans, right?
Well, the students couldn't get student loans. People who were thinking about going into the military chaplaincy or other things, like, they couldn't get their degree there because those agencies require an accredited degree.
Like if you're getting a teacher's certificate, can you do that if you're not accredited?
Not necessarily. I mean, you end up having to explain it. Or if you transfer, your unaccredited degree and try to go get a PhD somewhere, it can be done, but it's just a lot of extra work. And frankly, you can't just pick up the phone and call and say, well, we're not with you anymore and we're going to split the schools. There's a thing called the substantive change report that needs to be done ahead of time. And it's not just a one-page letter that says, this is what we're going to do.
You've done these.
Yeah, I've done these before. There's an enormous amount of work that has to go into this. And you can't just, because if you split, the church treasurer will take care of the finances and the HR department will take care of all those things. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on with that. They think perhaps they're going to go to ATS, the Association of Theological Schools, to get accreditation. Well, that's a 2 or 3 year undertaking. And ATS is a great organization and a great accreditor. They don't cut corners. I will be very surprised to see what comes out of that.
Sure. Well, let's talk about your dismissal, because as I understand, it came to an abrupt end in April 2015. That's when you got fired. However, this all began with a survey. Tell me about that survey and the process and why it came to a head like it did.
If I was chronicling this, I chronicle the beginning of the end, April 2014, We had we every year the seminary faculty had a dinner, and nice restaurant. We did it every year. It was fun. It was in the evening. It was a Monday. John came to it. MacArthur came to it. He was late. He was obviously in a surly, disagreeable mood. And he got up and in front of faculty, wives, and different staff members, and started off by saying, you guys teach, you're doing a great job. I'm proud of you. You're doing wonderful. It's all, but your leaders have just stabbed you in the back. They've just undercutting everything you're trying to do. And everyone's looking around at each other saying, what in the world is this all about?
Because this is supposed to be a nice banquet.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a nice banquet.
This is not where you
and
get that kind of news.
And he just continues to lambast. And there, basically, the leadership was, there were four people. There's Dr. Mayhew, Dr. Busenitz, myself, and a guy named Ray Maringer, who was in charge of admissions and different things. And it turned out what he was upset about, apparently, was we had begun to really work on why do students come to Master's Seminary? Mm-hmm. John was in his middle 70s at the time. We all understood he was not going to live forever. We would do surveys of income. Why did you come here? And the number one reason constantly was, John MacArthur. Mm-hmm. I want to come and study under John MacArthur, which he'd preach in chapel once in a while, but he didn't teach classes or anything like that. And we realized that's not sustainable when he's not here. So we had just earlier, before this dinner, had a new survey, and we had what we thought was success. The number one reason students were coming to the seminary was the reputation of the school, and then it was, the faculty and the academic programs, and there was something else. And John MacArthur as the reason people were coming to the seminary was like number 5. And
this was new. This had never happened
before. This had never happened before. And so we were happy. We thought we had accomplished. We were building for the future. He was apparently patently upset. I went straight from that dinner to LAX because I was flying to somewhere for a conference, and I didn't get back in the town until Thursday. And I went in the next morning. First thing, I went to Dr. Mayhew's office when he got there, and I just said, I just want to apologize. I think you're doing a great job. I think this is exactly what we're trying to do. And he was, I could tell, he was just utterly defeated. He just said, well, it is what it is. He was gone by fall. He had been replaced. And they dressed it up. They said, well, he's going to retire. He's going to become this research professor. Well, they moved him to a little office. It didn't last. We did an annual lecture series, and this was something Dick had thought up, and it was very well received over the years. And they renamed it, the Dick Mayhew Lecture Series. Well, apparently it lasted about a year and a half or two, maybe 1 year after that, and they canceled. They don't do the series anymore. It's not even listed on the webpage anymore. It's just gone. So it was like they've erased everything related to him. And then the following April, then it was a holiday. I got called in and said, we're reorganizing and you're not needed anymore. I'd been there for almost 25 years. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's fine, but I really want to talk to John personally about this. I mean, I think I've earned the right to have a conversation with the president over this. And I was told that, no, he's not interested in talking to you. And that was it. I was given a little bit of a severance, but I was not like I was planning to go look for a job at the time. But it was Monday. It was a holiday. I had my office cleaned out by Wednesday, and I was gone. I wasn't allowed to tell my staff. I wasn't allowed to meet with anybody.
You're like persona non grata.
Yeah, I was persona non grata. And it was, if you want to talk about fear and intimidation, well, my staff was just devastated. People, students otherwise, what in the world's going on? Fortunately, I wasn't teaching that semester, or that could have been even more problematic. But apparently I was wanted by somebody. I became the dean of the library in the University of North Carolina system, and had been there for the last 5 or 6 years.
So you had said that other people who had left, that their character was essentially assassinated as they were going out the door. Did this happen to you?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of various rumors and innuendos that were put out. And I think they did have some sort of staff meeting where they said, well, the reason Dennis is gone is this reorganization. And we just, we couldn't afford to pay him just to be the librarian anymore. And we were going to go, the funny thing is they didn't give me a choice. It's not like, well, would you take just a pay cut to keep being the librarian? And we don't want you to do accreditation or operations anymore. And that was never an option.
Mm-hmm. And to your knowledge, you don't know anything that you did that put you out of his good graces?
No. One thing that was told that kept being repeated was, you were too close with Dr. Mayhew. You were too much like him, and you were trying to run things the same way he ran things, as though that was a bad thing.
And I know as an administrator or a professor, often you don't have a lot of contact with the board. But I know when there's issues, they say you look at the board. And I know one of the things that came up in, again, this WASC report that was 3 years after you left was that the board was not independent. Almost everybody was good friends with MacArthur. They were, or pastors at Grace Community Church. I mean, Did you feel like you had any recourse that you could go to the board? What was the board like?
The board was exactly as WASC described. And it's interesting. I created a memo a couple months before I was gone, like January, February, because we were getting ready for a new cycle of accreditation. I said, these are the things we need to work on. I said, this is getting too insular. And we're going to run into problems. We need to stay ahead of this. And when they were put on probation in 2018, it's almost verbatim. Almost everything I wrote in that memo was one of the things that they talked about. I'm glad they got off probation. I love the school. It's a good school. It has a lot of potential. It's been mismanaged, I think, the last 5 or 7 years.
One of the things in the report, though, that we haven't talked about is some of the Clery Act and Title IX violations that supposedly were in there of women who say they were sexually assaulted when they were at the school. They tried to report it, and not only did they not find comfort or protection or help at the school, but that they felt like the administration actually turned on them.
Sure.
Do you have any firsthand knowledge of any of that?
Most of those occurrences were at the college. So with the female students and things like that. Obviously, the one person that worked for me that was fired and then sued, I don't know what all of that was about, but since she won, I assume that the judge thought that she was right. It was a disturbing trend. I mentioned the fact that Dr. MacArthur got rid of his secretary at the church who'd been like 25 years, and she still needed to work. The turnover and the women's place was in the home and not in ministry, and not even in supporting ministry, not even working. It was like, we don't want women to work at all. And we believe that so strongly, we're just not going to hire any women. I found that to be disturbing at a lot of levels. I mean, should women be pastors? I personally think the Bible is clear on that. But at the same time, there's lots of things women can be involved in. It's another story, but all the Beth Moore stuff and all the things that he said about her, it's just inappropriate. I mean, there's a way to express your being on the other side of an argument than pejorative sorts of comments like that.
Well, I've seen plenty of pejorative.
we all have. And that's and that may be the thing that upsets me the most about what's happening at the school is the trashing of reputations. I remember when my good friend Dr. Larry Pettigrew taught theology there for a long time, and he was moving to become dean at Shepherd Seminary in Cary, Indiana. Well, and MacArthur said in public, Larry Pettigrew's out of the will of God. And it was, he wasn't kidding, which reminds me of, if I can tell you another story. We were in a WASC meeting. It was a conference call. Dr. MacArthur was there, and myself and 2 other people from the college were there, and WASC was on the phone, and they were asking pointed questions. And one of the questions they asked was about, you don't have any minority representation on the board. And that's true. There are no women, there are no minorities on the board. And John, with a completely straight face, and he was dead serious. I was sitting like we're sitting right now. I was looking right at him, and he said, "We do have minorities on the board. We have a Dutchman." and I looked over at the vice president over the college, who's a friend of mine, and we looked at each other, and he says, "Yeah, we have." And MacArthur continued, "We have, John Van Wingerton, he's a Dutchman. He's not an American, and
I'm dumbfounded.
Well, we all were. And he wasn't making a joke. It wasn't lighthearted, and the people at the WASC office who are on the other end of the call, I could almost imagine their faces. They were just, dumbfounded. Well, they just kind of politely moved on to the next thing. They didn't even know how to respond to that.
I mean, that is a show of how insular it's become when
Mhm.
you don't even know that your opinion is so completely out of step with the conventional wisdom on things. I mean, that's stunning. But when you talk about people's character being assassinated, pejorative comments, I will say I have never in my life, and I've been reporting for a while, never been called or treated by a ministry director the way that Phil Johnson has treated me and the things that he has said about me. It is shocking to me that he remains in that position with his behavior. But I'll say even more than that. I didn't even know this, but a whole army of YouTubers out there that defend John and just vilify anybody who dares to publish anything that might possibly be negative about John. And they say things that are just flat out false. I mean, it's such a twisting of the truth or such a pulling things out of context. I've never received the kind of hate mail I'm getting now. The names I am called, the middle finger emojis. I mean, there's nothing godly about it.
Oh, no, not at all.
It's unbelievable to me.
It's like a mafia. I don't get any of it. There's nothing Christian about the way they deal with people who don't agree with them. When the school was put on probation by WASC, MacArthur went to the Spoken Chapel and he said, this is an organized satanic attack.
Right.
No, it wasn't. You need to get your house in order. It's not just a difference of opinion. It's an attack, or it's a satanic attack, or it's an organized, orchestrated attack on truth.
The same thing happened to Austin Doucette, who was the seminary student who spoke out about these COVID guidelines that TMUS had themselves. That was their guidelines that they were flagrantly violating, and how he was being mocked by professors because he was wearing a mask, these things. And he showed the conversation that was going on in this kind of a private social media that they had at the seminary. And they were saying, pray for Austin's salvation.
Yeah. If you don't agree with them, you must be evil, or you're just not saved. And all those things have been said about me. It's really too bad, because the schools had really good people, really knowledgeable people, broad-thinking people who could really make the schools shine much more than they have. I don't know what the future holds.
You said it's a good school. They have great people there. At the same time, we've got this really toxic culture, it sounds like. Can it change? And if so, what needs to happen?
I think the college perhaps is salvageable if the right person comes in to lead. If they split and the seminary becomes a ministry of the church, John's 81 or 82? What happens when he dies? Anyone who would want to succeed him at the church, I would question their mental stability at a certain level. But what happens? Who's being groomed to take over? No one that I'm aware of. I really don't know what's going to happen. And if the accrediting people, drop the hammer on the whole thing, and ultimately the college is going to suffer, things could be bad. So I don't know what the future holds. I think it's very, very shaky right now. What could they do to change? They should have allowed Sam Horn to continue what he was doing as the president. I think he had some good ideas. Him or somebody like him, a reworking of the board to get some independent thinking and move on from there.
And an end of cult of personality?
I think so. It can't be everything related to one person.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, we could talk a long time about this, but I have enjoyed our conversation.
There you have it. Again, that's Julie Roys, her podcast. You can find it at julieroys.com. You can subscribe to it. She talks about a lot of things going on in the church. You can draw your own conclusions about what was said there. A lot of accusations, not a lot of proof. A lot of troubling concepts that I think deal with the broader issues than just John MacArthur, the Christian publishing world, the whole seminary industrial complex, the cult of celebrity. I think that is an issue. And it is, I will end with this. Christians, their go-to, and I won't say the Christian in the pew. Let's start with the men behind the pulpit. It is very, very easy for Christian pastors and for Christian men in ministry that anytime anything negative happens to us, to say we're under satanic attack. The people left the church and they're saying bad things about me. I'm under satanic attack. This person made an accusation against me. I'm under satanic attack. I fell into sin. I'm under satanic attack. Christian men got to stop with that. I'm going to call it an excuse. Do I believe in the existence of Satan? Absolutely. Satan is not omnipresent, so he's not always like, I'm under satanic attack, that Satan is directly after me, and I can't, at any time someone comes after me or does something to me, that it's a satanic attack. One, people are sinners, so they're going to do things that are sinful. I'm going to do things that are sinful. Sometimes it's just the natural outworking of our sinful fleshly behaviors and motivations and attitudes. It has nothing to do with a satanic attack. But I think we start using that to protect ourselves, that not like, I can't do anything wrong, and even if I did something wrong, it's because of a satanic attack. It's a satanic attack. And the same thing Christians do that with, it's either a satanic attack or it's persecution. Everything's persecution. Everything is persecution. Doesn't matter what. Oh, we lost our accreditation. It's persecution. Wait, there's COVID restriction. That's persecution. Wait, it doesn't matter. Oh, they want a fire code. I guess, for the building, I guess that's persecution. Everything is persecution. Everything is a satanic attack. And it just, there can be times where there's actual persecution. There can be times where, quote unquote, it's a satanic attack. But you got to be very careful that those just don't become cliches that you use to always defend yourself by making yourself the victim. All right. That is something we have to, we've got to take responsibility for our actions. We've got to deal with ourselves. Look, anytime someone leaves the church and then says bad things about me, I could try to argue it's a satanic attack. It can irritate me. It can make me angry. But the one thing I always try to do is go, I wonder if I could have done anything better. I wonder if I could have done anything different. And in some cases, I think maybe I could have done things different, but I would have only prolonged the inevitable that would have ultimately left anyway and maybe have done more damage. So it was probably better that I didn't do anything different. So I will sit there and spend hours going back and forth about every person that's ever walked through the front door and person who's ever walked out the front door. I will sit there and beat myself up going, I should have done this, maybe. And then sometimes I'll go, well, you know what? Especially with the COVID situation, there's a lot of people who left who I may go, maybe I could have done it better. But in some cases, most likely the COVID situation would have been like, it would have caused a major it would have been such a major uproar and controversy because of the way I handled it by believing COVID was real and taking precautions. I would have just caused more problems. So in some cases, I'm glad many people left who did leave because it would have only caused me problems. But I hope I haven't ever stood behind the pulpit and used an excuse that I'm under satanic attack and that the reason this happened or the reason this happened. Hopefully, I've always tried to just say, no, I'm the one who messed up. It's my fault. It's no one else's fault. I've tried to do that. I've tried. And then when people leave, I've always just, they left. Maybe sometimes you can hear the frustration in my voice because I'm a human being. Sometimes you can hear that I'm bothered by it. But I've always tried to say people are free to come in and people are free to leave and they're free to leave. I've never told anyone in our church not to have relationships with anyone who leave or to break fellowship, or I've never done anything like that because that would be wrong. That would be wrong. So because people are free to come and free to go, and I don't go trying to manipulate or beg to get someone to come back because that to me just prolongs the inevitable. So, but in churches, there's these difficulties and these problems because we're sinners. And I don't know what's going on in MacArthur's ministry. I can't say. There's a lot of troubling things. I will say with my own personal dealings with Phil Johnson, wow, that guy can be rude. I don't even know that guy can be rude, mean, nasty, condescending, no grace, no mercy, no kindness, no gentleness. I would say pugnacious. Yeah, I think that would be, but I guess that doesn't discredit him from ministry. My biggest issue in all of this is I want to know, why is MacArthur's name on certain books and did he write them? And if he did not write them, that is a problem. Financially, there's some issues going on there that we've talked about. And the way Horn was fired from the seminary and then was told he was disqualified because he was pugnacious. those a lot of things. But some of that is just, I'm telling you, if you look into every ministry, you're going to find some of these exact same issues where there's personnel differences and people getting fired and there's arguments and disagreements because they're sinners in every ministry. And it's sad, but it's the reality. And we've got to be more honest with our own weaknesses, our own fleshly states, and that the fact that sin shows up in all of our lives. So pray for everyone at MacArthur's ministry. I don't know what the future is going to hold, but what I think is going to happen is what typically happens. Once MacArthur is gone, then Grace Community, Grace to You, Master Seminary becomes really irrelevant and goes away because it's really based off one person. It's based off the cult of a person. And I'm not going to say cult of a person. I'm not saying in a negative way. I'm just saying I'll use this word, the celebrity of a person. And that's the way big ministries are built on. They're built on people. And that's why I've always, look, I'm never going to become a celebrity of anything because I'm too go against the majority all the time, but I was always cautious. That's why when the church wanted to make a church sign, leave my name off of it. I didn't want my picture on sermon audio. Everything, I've always tried to leave my name off everything because I don't ever want it to be about me. I don't want it to be about me. Yeah, and because I know, and I'll just end with this, because also I know I'm a human being. I say I don't want it to make it about me because I say that because deep down, in some cases, I want it to be about me. I hope that makes sense. I don't want it to be about me because deep down, I know that in some cases, I want it to be about me. I do want that feeling of, oh, I'm good at this. Oh, everyone thinks I'm great at this. I do want that feeling at times. So I have to fight that by doing everything I can not to make it about me. And it's hard to find that balance. It's hard to find that balance because you just got to be honest with what's inside of us. And because we're human beings and male ego and all that is, there's that trapping there. So you got to be aware of you got to just be honest with what's inside of you. And I think, I don't know what's going on in MacArthur's ministry, but put it this way, and I'll end with this. There's a lot of people poking around. There's a lot of people searching. There's a lot of people prying, a lot of people asking questions. And when you push and push back and attack the people asking the questions, that just makes them ask more questions. And then sooner or later, if you dig deep enough, you're going to find dirt because people are sinners. And that's when it gets ugly. Hey, how about everyone throw out the peace flag, pull up the white flag, wave the white flag, call for a truce, and have an actual meeting and say, here's my questions, and these are the questions I need answered, or I'm not going to stop. And it's sad, though, when you ask those questions, then people attack you in the most unchristian way as possible. Because the emails that she talks about getting, I've received those kinds of emails where they threaten you, call you names, use vulgar language, all in the name of Christ. Basically, if you go against their view, you're lost and you're not saved. I've received those kinds of emails. It's horrific. It's horrible to see that how it plays out in Christianity, which just demonstrates all this claim that Christians somehow we have the power of God living inside of us, and now we can live this godly life. It constantly is proven that we're just sinners saved by grace, and we still sin on a pretty regular and consistent basis. Does that excuse the sin? God forbid. Never. Should we fight against it? Yes. But maybe we should be more honest with our own frailty and our own weaknesses and our own failings, because that's the only way to ever move forward. I don't know what's going on with MacArthur's ministry. This is not going away. That's all I'm going to tell you. This is not going away. There's too many people getting involved. And it starts quiet and everybody's like, that's nothing. And then next thing it blows up and it's all over the news, like the Ravi Zacharias situation. There was a lot of rumors and rumbling going around for a very long time and nobody looked into it. And then finally it blew up. That's all I'm saying. There's too many times I've watched this where you hear all of these rumblings and everyone dismisses it and then it blows up and then everybody's like, well, why didn't anyone tell me? Well, everyone was talking about it. You just weren't paying attention. So there you go. You know what? Whether you like MacArthur or hate MacArthur, set that personal feelings aside. What you don't want is for any ministry to implode. Whether you liked Mark Driscoll or hated Mark Driscoll, you didn't want to see that entire ministry in Seattle implode in and on itself. You don't ever want to see that to happen. Pray for everyone that there can be reconciliation, that truth can come out, repentance if repentance is needed, and just that everyone can move forward in a godly way. All right, I know that took a long time, but I wanted to get that all out of the way because it's going all over the place. So let's just deal with it. We've dealt with it, and hopefully this will all go away behind the scenes. It'll be resolved behind closed doors and not in front of the entire world. And hopefully this doesn't turn into anything uglier than it already has been in some ways. All right, I'll stop right there. Julie Roys is her name, Julie Roys. You can look her up on social media, or you can just look at her website. She keeps up with what's happening in the church, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And trust me, if you look at her website, there's a lot of ugly out there, and Christians just need to look at what's going on within the church because we spend a lot of time yelling at everyone in the world about how bad they are. All right, God bless.